I wanted to write about this plan to get the Pope to resign and the type of church that those who are urging him to resign would like to have. I clothed their names in fiction, gave them fictional names. 95% of the fictional names cover real people, real cardinals, real bishops.
Of course, and I'm sure this is going to disturb some people.
Well, yes and no, provided that the real name isn't down, they feel they get away with it. But I thought we should put down, and then of the facts, or something else, the facts trace the history of John Paul II as Pope since about 1990, roughly. But it's meant to outline this plan. It's also meant to remind Roman Catholics and non-Catholics that John Paul II has left the greater questions suspended. He doesn't solve them at all.
Right.
And the book ends on a note of suspense, as you probably have found out.
Oh, yes, it's quite suspenseful.
That's why I wrote the book, wrote Windswept House. It does emphasize, though, the desirability on the part of many, the desirability of the Church to be a useful socio-cultural and socio-political stabilizing factor throughout the New World Order.
But I don't know how that's going to be accomplished necessarily, because there's so much anti-church sentiment or Christian.
Well, but the proponents of this say if the Church makes that compromise about abortion, contraception, marriage, divorce, then we all settle down.
Well, yeah.
Of course, the Church will not do that, except certain leaders would like to do that.
Do you think, just one quick question, we've got to go to another break, but what would you say if somebody said, well, you're just saying this to stir up in a sensational way to undermine the Church? How would you answer that?
Oh, Lord God. I'll tell you, Michael, if anybody wants to read my book, or read any of my books, but this book in particular, he will know that it would be impossible for somebody to write that book unless he loved this Pope and he loves his religion and has a devotion to the Virgin and a devotion to the Church. One has only got to read the book.
Okay, enough said. Okay, we're going to come back and we'll get some final thoughts and
sure.
Wrap this up. We might have to do another program on this because I wanted to get into the exorcism thing too. But
yes, well, we're going to have some words on that, Mike.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. You're very prolific and very articulate in your speech. Talking about Windswept House, a Vatican novel that is now on the market, and I highly recommend this book, as well as Keys of this Blood, if you want to get a real primer on political affairs as they have been happening in the world over the last few years. It's an incredible read. It's a very dense read for one thing, and it's got a lot of information in it, and it's very well researched information. Malachi, what is the future of all of this? We're coming up on the end of the millennium, and everybody is acting strange, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
The reason it's funny, we're in transition. We all know in our bones, no matter how smug we may appear to be, we all know we're in transition. And since we've been talking about the Roman Catholic Church, let me say what I think is going to happen or what is happening is, at the present moment, this Roman Catholic Church, of which I'm a member, and a practicing priest, I say Mass every day, and I hear babies, I hear confessions, and I baptize babies, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm a believer. I'm really, Michael, a fuddy-duddy, conservative believer, believe you me.
Maybe that's not so bad in light of everything that I've seen here.
But in the light of all that, hear what I say. This organization, I'm talking about the visible organization, from the Pope down to the local parish priest, dioceses. This is a Potemkin village. It's a facade.
Okay.
There is no longer any evangelization taking place.
No.
There is no longer any vibrancy. Life has gone out of the system.
As well as hope.
As well as hope. The system is shot, but it's a Potemkin village. Still has glorious panoplies, and if the Pope comes to this country, he can expect a crowd of 500,000, 750,000, and they come out to see him, and to venerate him, and to sort of say, God bless our Pope, and to stand in the rain at his masses that in Yonkers, 250,000 of them stood.
I know there was some really weird energy, not weird, but I mean good energy,
sure,
in '93 when he was here in Denver.
I know, tremendous. But
there was a considerable amount of interest that I got lots of calls from people about that program asking for more, and we decided to do a second edition of this and continue kind of where we left off last week, and there was a lot more information that Malachi wanted to talk about, but as you're well aware, 1 hour does not cover it so well. So tonight we're going to do it again and bring him back. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Malachi Martin. Good evening, Malachi.
Good evening, Michael, and thank you very much for having me. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you're back with us. And before we get started, give our audience a little bit of your background.
My background is I was born in Ireland, and I was educated there until I was 18, and then I was sent abroad, and I was trained in Semitic languages, Oriental art and history, and archaeology, and then in order to be a Bible professor of biblical languages in Rome, where I was stationed, and I got to know 3 popes there. And in 1964, I left there, came over to America, and became an American citizen, and settled down in New York, and I write books here and do TV and radio.
Now, you have written a lot of books, and particularly the books concerning Roman Catholicism, the Vatican, and that types of things.
That's right.
Tonight, I want to kind of get off on a little bit different tangent and talk about your past experiences as an exorcist.
Yes, that is a fascinating thing, and it's always fascinating for a lot of people. We must tell them beforehand, Michael, that exorcism itself and possession is not a joyous thing. It's not a happy thing. Possession is a dirty, insalubrious, unhealthy, mucky, unhealthy, and unpleasant situation when you come across it, but it's a necessary evil in the sense that we have to deal with it once we meet people who are possessed.
Now, I know that the people in the United States, I for one, being of the age that I was a young man when the famous movie The Exorcist came out in the early 70s, that kind of gives us a picture. Is that an accurate picture of what?
No, it's a bit of Frankenstein sort of vampire business. No, it doesn't really give the essence of it, except, the fright of seeing somebody, Linda Blair's head turning around to 180 degrees and that sort of business, and people falling through glass windows. But the real horror, the real pain, what is wrong, what hurts in possession is the presence of the evil one. I mean, what happens is this, Michael, somebody comes along and says, look, I need help. Or their mother brings them along, or their wife, or their husband. Sometimes their lover, sometimes it's a cop. And you say, okay, have you been examined by a psychiatrist? Yes, and they find nothing. And there's nothing physically wrong. No, doctors have given us the complete triage, and there's nothing wrong with that. Something, I'm tortured by the devil. I made a pact with the devil. And when we start an exorcism, within the first 20 minutes we know whether it's genuine or not. How do we know? That's what the point I want to get across to you. Suddenly, it becomes evidence, palpably evident, that we are all, the exorcist and his assistant and the possessed person, we're in the presence of something that hates us in a way that you've never felt hated before. You have never felt hated before. It's like an invisible animal clawing at you with the claws you can't escape. It's a palpable feeling. Then you know we have possession.
Do you see any kind of physical manifestation of that?
Oh, yes, there are. Well, of that, not particular, no, you do. There are physical manifestations like changing temperature from freezing cold to stinking warm, stickily warm, the smells, odors, objects flying around. You always make sure, if possible, that where the exorcism is done, there's nothing hanging on the walls. There are no movable bits of furniture around the place. You always make sure of that because they're going to fly around. And then there's violence on the part of the possessed person at times. They have to be held down. That's why you have assistants, strong, burly men who have been through it before and who are not afraid and who have been through it. Because a lot of people, the moment they enter their first exorcism, they become incontinent. It scares the life out of them.
This is a very specialized field, I take it.
Well, it's very specialized. Nobody should tamper with it or have anything to do with it except with permission and training. It's simply, as I said in the very beginning, it's the most unhealthy, insalubrious, mucky, dirty, inhuman activity you could participate in, but we must in order to save these people. Now, the difficulty is that many people, regard Satan or Lucifer, because they're two distinct beings, They regard them as sort of myths. You know, he's an old man with dirty ears and cloven hoofs and dirty books under his arm, saying, "Come behind the curtains and masturbate with me," or something, or do something naughty. No. These are very, very sophisticated spirits who are there to harm us, and they're real.
Fascinating. Malachi, who gets possessed? I mean,
well, you see, we have tried in the past, Michael, now I'm speaking about a career stretching over 35 years. We have tried in the past to create the profile of the possessible person, so to speak. And we have found that there's no norm. For instance, neither sex, nor age, nor education, nor color, nor race, nor riches or poorness, or intellectual degrees.
Crosses all boundaries.
It's at random, apparently random. And of course it's random because it depends on the free will of everybody. And therefore it's haphazard. There's no law. There's no rule at all. And some people are possessed willingly. They set out to get be possessed by Satan for one reason or another. Or others are possessed because they want something which leads them into possession. People approach it in a different way. We have a new, since I started it in the 60s, there's a new phenomenon we have noticed, more and more young people coming forward, 30-somethings, 40-somethings, because we're all old men, but there are 30s, 70s, 40s, coming forward and saying, look, I made a pact when I was 25, when I was 32, when I was 23, and I want to get rid of it now. How do I get rid of it? It's a very frightening thing to find so many of them.
Well, I know that some people out there in the audience might be familiar with Scott Peck's work, but he wrote a book called The People of the Lie. And one of the things that he said I was very impressed with, and I think it's probably true, is that there has been no scientific study conducted in the psychiatric community of human evil.
No, well, the psychiatric community, anyway, you see, has always been rather, not atheistic exactly, but it abstracts from all religion as such. What has happened to us in this particular segment of the country, the northeast corner, is that we work very closely with psychiatrists, especially the psychiatrists who deal with what we call MPDs, multiple personality disorder people. You know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And we work very closely with them, and we do succeed in healing them completely.
What are the characteristics of, and I understand that multiple personality disorder can oftentimes be, well, okay, let's back up. Let's say this.
Yes.
Demonic possession, is it misdiagnosed?
It is misdiagnosed to a large extent. I have visited various asylums, people who are, or psychiatric hospitals, and there are people inside there who will never be healed because they're not psychiatrically ill, or mentally ill, they are possessed.
Can they, okay.
And I've seen the same thing in prisons. I used to do a lot of work in the prisons in this area. It's the same thing. Possession is more common than you'd like to think.
You think it is more common?
More common than you'd like to think.
In what, I guess.
People actually are possessed by Satan or Lucifer or one of the demons.
But we're not to expect them to behave like Linda Blair in the movie, like you said.
No, that's a bit sort of, that was, Hollywood. No, this is far more frightening, and it's far more devastating. It ruins families. And then you must remember, Michael, that in this country, as in Europe, but in this country especially since we're talking about it, there are families in which Satanism descends by bloodlines ever since the Plymouth Rock.
Okay, now let's go here with this.
Yes.
Can you compare Satanism or people that practice Satanism?
Yes.
Does it always cross over with demonic possession?
Of course it does.
What is the dynamic of that?
The dynamic of it is the communication of power by Satan or Lucifer, or both.
So if you have someone who is possibly demonically possessed, they might demonstrate the ability to move furniture or...
much more effective than that, to be successful in Wall Street, to succeed in business.
Uh-huh.